Hello, Bernie Zelaya here to lead you on a brief exploration of Emil Durkheim's last and perhaps still most famous book, The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life. In this book, published in 1912, Durkheim explored another societal feature that he believed also had something to do with healthy societies, namely religion. And Durkheim's approach to religion is unique, even a bit startling, for he was a French Jewish atheist that loved religion. We don't usually think of atheists as people who love religion. His appreciation for religion was not merely a nostalgia for a religious upbringing from which he had departed, though his father was a rabbi. And as we will see, Durkheim loved religion because of what he perceived to be the beneficial role it served in human society. So let's dive in. In this slide, you can see a couple of dogs sitting on the American flag. The actress, Kaley Cuoco, on the 4th of July 2016, posted this picture of her dogs wearing American flags tied around their necks as a kind of neckerchiefs and sitting on a flag. When she posted this picture, it set off a firestorm on the internet because a lot of people found it very offensive. Cuoco apologized and affirmed her commitment to the American values. The question I want to ask you, for whom is the flag important? And why is it important for them? And if it's not the flag, it is the Christian symbol of the cross that is important to other people. Why would they be unhappy to see the cross destroyed? Why would some Americans be unhappy to see the flag burned? Durkheim's got a pretty good answer, I think, and that's what we're going to look at now. Durkheim used a functional approach, which is still used in sociology and anthropology. He argued the sacred symbols get people together and create a mood that enables us to worship our own society. Put more provocatively, when we worship God, we are actually worshiping our own community. How does he get to this conclusion? He lays out his argument in his 1912 book, The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life, which is the book he's probably still most remembered for and which we'll explore for the remainder of this lecture. In it, he asks, what is religion? Why do we have religion? What makes it important? Now, if you're thinking I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God or unseen spirits or anything like that, you might still be religious in the sociological and anthropological understanding. Being religious is not really about the spiritual stuff. It has to do with what you regard as sacred, and the sacred need not and often does not have anything to do with venerating unseen realms of magic. You may regard your nation's flag as sacred, i.e., really important, such that it angers you to see the American flag burned, or have dogs sit on it. For another example, we are the only species that we know of that buries our dead, or does some sort of funeral or memorial ritual for our dead. When people die, we don't just toss their remains in a trash bin. Every now and then, stories emerge of this happening, and we are mortified and angered at the thought of such disrespect for the dead. So, you don't need to believe in spirits or unseen gods to be religious, as far as Durkheim and other sociologists and anthropologists that follow him are concerned. Instead, religion is about beliefs and actions which are directed towards the sacred and not the profane. So in this image, you have a bunch of people standing around waiting for a bus. Durkheim would have called this the profane. It's just average, mundane, daily stuff. It doesn't have any deep significance or particular meaning in their lives. They are just waiting for a bus so they can go home. But in the picture on the left, you have a group of Jewish men celebrating their Torah, venerating their holy scroll, which is the first part of the Bible and holy to both Jews and Christians. Here, they're directing their actions towards a sacred object. It is sacred because it is something, according to Durkheim, that is set apart from the everyday, the mundane things of life. They regard it as something very special and deeply meaningful. So to put it another way, what defines religion is beliefs and actions which are directed towards something that is sacred and not profane or mundane. There is a tendency in the West to label certain beliefs as religious and separate them out from public life. People brought up in a secular setting often view religious ideas as having to do with something out there, something unseen, something to do with a hereafter and an afterlife. This was the tendency in Durkheim, Marx, and Weber's day as well. Indeed, much of what Marx said about religion can be read this way. In contrast, however, Durkheim argues that ultimately the sacred stuff is not really about something out there, like this picture found in Michelangelo's famous painting, The Creation of Adam, depicting something eternal and beautiful, but actually more about our own societies. Religion, Durkheim says, even when it appears to be about unseen supernatural realms up above us, or unseen spirits embedded and active in the biophysical reality surrounding us, is really about our communities, a community of fellow believers, rather than about particular individuals and whatever those particular individuals might believe about these unseen realms. Instead, religion is about our actions, directed in the here and now. This then is how Durkheim defines religion, and you can find this at page 47 of the Gutenberg online edition of The Elementary Forms of the Religious Life. A religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things, that is to say, things set apart and forbidden, beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community all those that adhere to them. The second element, which thus finds a place in our definition, is no less essential than the first. For by showing that the idea of religion is inseparable from that of the religious community, it makes it clear that religion should be understood as an eminently collective thing." End quote. Durkheim arrives at this definition of religion by looking at the ethnographic data, especially from the early anthropologists Spencer and Gillen, who had done field work with a number of Aboriginal tribes. From these ethnographies, Durkheim identifies what he calls totemic principle. He elaborates this in great detail in the book, but in quick summary, it worked like this. There is something in the natural landscape, a type of animal, plant, or physical object, or geographical feature. This feature of the biophysical world is then turned into a symbol of this landscape feature through painting, carving, or some other sort of artistic representation, creating the totem. Finally, a particular clan identifies itself with that totem. In the case of kangaroos or honey ants, one clan becomes the kangaroo clan, another becomes the honey ant clan. Totemism, as a religious worldview, then imagines that the totemized feature is, very literally, in the totem. The totem is not merely a representation, and the totem is, in like manner, literally in the clan that identifies itself intensely with both the totemized feature and the totem. To put it starkly, with the totemic principle, the natural feature equals the totem, which in turn equals the clan, which in turn equals the natural totemized feature. The following passages capture the core of Durkheim's ideas about religion, and I'm going to quote them at length. They explain Durkheim's key insights that continue to inspire much new theory in sociology. Rather than trying to put these on the screen, I'm going to ask you to read along in the text, either at the Gutenberg website or in the PDF of the Gutenberg online edition that I have sent you. For the first quote, go to the first paragraph of Chapter 6, Part 1, found on pages 188-89. Quoting now, we have seen that totemism places the figured representations of the totem in the first rank of the things it considers sacred. Next come the animals or vegetables whose name the clan bears, and finally, the members of the clan. Since all these things are sacred in the same way, though to different degrees, their religious character can be due to none of the special attributes distinguishing them from each other. If a certain species of animal or vegetable is the object of reverential fear, this is not because of its special properties. For the human members of the clan enjoy this same privilege, though to a slightly inferior degree, while the mere image of this same plant or animal inspires an even more pronounced respect. The similar sentiments inspired by these different sorts of things in the mind of the believer, which give them their sacred character, can evidently come only from some common principle partaken of alike by the totemic emblems, the men of the clan, and the individuals of the species serving as totem. In reality, it is to this common principle that the cult is addressed. In other words, totemism is the religion, not of such and such animals or men or images, but of an anonymous and impersonal force found in each of these beings, but not to be confounded with any of them. No one possesses it entirely, and all participate in it. It is so completely independent of the particular subjects in whom it incarnates itself that it precedes them and survives them. Individuals die, generations pass, and are replaced by others, but this force always remains actual, living, and the same. It animates the generations of today as it animated those of yesterday, and as it will animate those of tomorrow. Taking the words in a large sense, we may say that it is the God adored by each totemic cult. Yet it is an impersonal God, without name or history, immanent in the world, and diffused in an innumerable multitude of things. End quote. So, Durkheim concludes that this God adored by each totemic cult is this impersonal God that is embedded in an innumerable multitude of things. But how does the totemic cult arrive at this perception of this impersonal God? Durkheim works to lay it out in the next chapter, Chapter 7, Part 1, starting with the first paragraph at pages 205 and 206. Quoting now, it is obviously not out of the sensations which the things serving as totems are able to arouse in the mind. We have shown that these things are frequently insignificant. The lizard, the caterpillar, the rat, the ant, the frog, the turkey, the breamfish, the plum tree, the cockatoo, etc., to cite only those names which appear frequently in the lists of Australian totems, and are not of a nature to produce upon men these great and strong impressions, which in a way resemble religious emotions, and which impress a sacred character upon the objects they create. It is true that this is not the case with the stars and the great atmospheric phenomenon, which have, on the contrary, all that is necessary to strike the imagination forcibly. But as a matter of fact, these serve only very exceptionally as totems. It is even probable that they were very slow in taking this office. So it is not the intrinsic nature of the thing whose name the clan bears that marked it out to become the object of a cult. Also, if the sentiments which it inspired were really the determining cause of the totemic rites and beliefs, it would be the preeminently sacred thing. The animals or plants employed as totems would play an eminent part in the religious life. But we know that the center of the cult is actually elsewhere. It is the figurative representations of this plant or animal and the totemic emblems and symbols of every sort which have the greatest sanctity. So it is in them that is found the source of that religious nature, of which the real objects represented by these emblems receive only a reflection. But the totem is before all a symbol, a material expression of something else. But of what? From the analysis to which we have been giving our attention, it is evident that it expresses and symbolizes two different sorts of things. In the first place, it is the outward and visible form of what we have called the totemic principle or God. But it is also the symbol of the determined society called the clan. It is its flag. It is the sign by which each clan distinguishes itself from the others, the visible mark of its personality, a mark borne by everything which is part of the clan under any title whatsoever, men, beasts, or things. So if it is at once the symbol of the God and of the society, is that not because the God and the society are only one? How could the emblem of the group have been able to become the figure of this quasi-divinity if the group and the divinity were two distinct realities? The God of the clan, the totemic principle, can therefore be nothing else than the clan itself, personified and represented to the imagination under the visible form of the animal or vegetable which serves as the totem. Pages 205-206, end quote. Let me provide a few slides to illustrate this. Here I'll use the kangaroo clan. We see the first, the kangaroo, which in turn equals the kangaroo rock painting, which equals the kangaroo clan. In the religious ideas of the clan, each element interpenetrates the other two. We can also illustrate this way, though really the arrow should point in each direction, not just one direction. Now, these foregoing passages, if read in isolation, could allow us to imagine that Durkheim was merely theorizing about the mindset of the Aboriginal clans that had been recently studied. But Durkheim's concern, his mission, was to understand religion back home in Europe, and he concludes that the totemic religion of the Australian Aboriginals provided the key to understanding the religions that surrounded him back in France. Jumping further into Chapter 7, starting at the 10th paragraph of Part 4 at page 229, he states this, and I'm quoting now. We are now able to understand how the totemic principle, and in general every religious force, comes to be outside of the object in which it resides. It is because the idea of it is in no way made up of the impressions directly produced by this thing, this natural feature depicted in the totem, upon our senses or minds. Religious force is only the sentiment inspired by the group in its members, but projected outside of the consciousnesses that experience them and objectified. To be objectified, they are fixed upon some object which thus becomes sacred, but any object might fulfill this function. In principle, there are none whose nature predestines them to it to the exclusion of all others. But also there are none that are necessarily impossible. Everything depends upon the circumstances which lead the sentiment creating religious ideas to establish itself here or there, upon this point or upon that one. Therefore, the sacred character assumed by an object is not implied in the intrinsic properties of this latter. It is added to them. The world of religious things is not one particular aspect of empirical nature. It is superimposed upon it. This conception of the religious, finally, allows us to explain an important principle found at the bottom of a multitude of myths and rites. End quote. So, to summarize, in Durkheim's understanding, there is nothing inherently sacred about the totemized feature. It is just a type of animal, type of plant, type of physical object in the biophysical world that surrounds us. The group, the clan, the large society imposes the sacredness upon this biophysical feature or features, and then is projected by the collective consciousness of the group into the outer world, and then worshipped by the group. And in thus worshipping the totem, they are actually worshipping themselves. At first blush, this sounds alarming. It seems Durkheim was suggesting that religion and the religious impulse is a sort of cultural pathology, a form of collective narcissism. But Durkheim was actually arguing the opposite. In contrast to both Marx and Weber's more negative assessments of religion, Durkheim understood himself to be offering a positive appraisal. Durkheim's model partially agrees with that conceived by the German philosopher and anthropologist Ludwig Feuerbach, who argued that ideas of God were merely the psychological projection of the self-conceptions of individual humans onto an idea of an external God. For Feuerbach, as he laid this out in his most famous book, The Essence of Christianity, God is simply individual humans writ large and projected out upon the cosmos. Durkheim agrees that conceptions of God, conceptions of the sacred, are human projections. But for Durkheim, it is human society, this larger human group, that is writ large into society's collective ideas about God. And for Durkheim, there is no scandal in the fact that the idea of God is a mere projection. Indeed, for Durkheim, projecting society's ideals outside itself only to have individuals communally reintegrate these projected values back into themselves serves as a vital form of social glue. He explains it this way, quoting, "The really religious beliefs are always common to a determined group, which makes profession of adhering to them and of practicing the rites connected with them. They are not merely received individually by all members of this group, they are something belonging to the group. They make its unity. The individuals which compose it feel themselves united to each other by the simple fact that they have a common faith." End quote. See Chapter 1, Paragraph 5 on page 43. This, for Durkheim, is all to the good. This positive assessment makes sense if we recall Durkheim's overall conception of human society as being analogous to a biological organism. The various organs of human society need to be able to hold together in order to function together. And religious conceptions of God are one of the ways that humans have developed to create the social glue that makes this possible. The conception of God may not be true in an absolute empirical sense, but they are pragmatically and sociologically true. They help human societies work successfully. I'll end this brief exploration of Durkheim on this cautionary note. Durkheim shared in that ethos of optimism from the 19th century. Humanity was, he believed, marching forward to bigger and better things. It had problems, but these problems were solvable, and sociological investigation was going to help solve them. Durkheim published The Elementary Forms in 1912, 2 years before the cataclysm that would be World War I. The eruption of collective insanity all around him and throughout Europe shattered Durkheim's hopeful outlook. Tragically, Durkheim's son was killed as a soldier on the battlefront, leaving Durkheim devastated. 2 years later, he collapsed and died of a stroke in 1917, a year before World War I would end. This concludes my lectures on Emile Durkheim. Our next major theorist will be Max Weber.